Mad P. I just wanted to let everybody know today we're ordering the barcodes for my paperback and ebook versions of Conan, Rise of the Warrior Queen. It's something that I'm worried about, especially knowing that within the next week or two my book is going to be going live, is the cancel culture. Now, my book is not for children. There's nothing I can do to prevent parents from letting their kids read the book. I mean, my parents let me watch horror movies when I was a kid. And they didn't traumatize me. But, you know, that's the parents' responsibility to evaluate their children and decide when they're old enough or mature enough to read books or watch movies. I mean, it's like Tom Sawyer. I mean, I don't feel it's inappropriate for children, but I do understand that, parents have to evaluate their children to when they're mature enough to read that book. Do I want my book in public libraries? Yeah. I want adults to be able to get my books. Do I want my book in college libraries? Yes. It's made for adults. It's made for the older reader. Do I want my book in high schools? That's kind of a gray area because of the issue where if the high school is a high school and middle school, I'm really not comfortable just putting my book in the hands of middle school and younger. Pretty much anyone 8th grade and younger, I'm really uncomfortable with my book being in their hands. The book is extremely violent. I mean, in all honesty, I'm almost embarrassed that I actually wrote this, but for the cancel culture out there, you need to understand that Conan is facing an evil that it's the evil that the world defeats. It's the true evil. I mean, Sharon is all but the right hand of Satan himself. I mean, the dude is extremely evil. He's a horrible, horrible, horrible being. I've read a lot of Dean Koontz. I've read a lot of Stephen King. I've watched a lot of Quentin Tarantino. I'm a big fan of Rob Zombie movies. The Fireflies. I love the Fireflies. I even have the ten Firefly trilogy collection set. Hopefully someday I'll be able to get that signed by Rob Zombie. That's one of my prized possessions. My girlfriend bought that for me for my birthday last year or the year before. When it came out. She bought it for me for my birthday when it came out. I can't remember if it's last year or the year before. Time is funny for me driving a truck. But that spilled into this book. Those influences spilled into this book. T.W. Brown, actually I didn't read it. I listened to it. But I listened to the whole T.W. Brown Dead series. And the brutality from that bled into my book. And the book is extremely brutal. It's the only Conan book I'm ever going to write because from this book, it takes off into my future plans for writing a saga that's going to include Loriana for some time. and it's going to get into other things. It's going to go through ages, so it's going to be my Lord of the Lord of the Rings, I guess you could say, but it's going to go through ages. It's going to be my Dark Tower series, but it's going to go through ages. It's starting all the way back in the time of Conan, and when I write my final book, if I can progress the way I want to, it'll probably end somewhere in the future. There's things that I don't want to give away, because if I give them away, it's going to give away a secret that's revealed in the end of Rise of the Warrior Queen, and it brings to light the background that I'm laying for another really well known tale. And that part of the series, though, that's not for. I'm going to go through Loriana, and then I'm going to go through a whole nother section before I even get. So, where that all is going to tie everything together nice and neat in a bow, that's 4 or 5 books down the line. But it lays the origins, it lays my idea for the origins of that tale. It lays down the origins of the characters in that tale through my mind. But the book is not for children. I'm even making sure that I mark the book adults only, 18 and over. I don't want my book in elementary school libraries. I don't even really want my book in middle school libraries. Because of the books I read when I was in high school and even in middle school. I mean, I read Fahrenheit 411, Ray Bradbury. I read a lot of Ray Bradbury when I was in middle school. Even I started reading Ray Bradbury when I was in elementary school. Actually, started reading Stephen King when I was in elementary school. I started reading Dean Koontz when I was in 6th or 7th grade. But I also started reading when I was only about 3 years old. My mother taught me to read and write. So before I was even in school, I was reading and writing. By the time I was in kindergarten, I was writing in script. By the time I was in kindergarten, I was doing long form multiplication and division. I mean, my mom, I'm not homeschooled, but my introduction to schooling was at home. And because I was reading at such a young age, and because I was reading anything I could get my hands on, I was reading about the horrors of the Vietnam War when I was 4 years old in Time Life magazine. I was reading the horror. I grew up reading adult magazines such as Time, talking about the atrocities going on in Beirut, the 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 guerrilla warfare going on in South America at the time, the Colombian drug trade. I was learning about all this stuff when preschool through on. I was starting to read those things. So, I understand my mentality to understand the difference between fiction and reality is much different. I mean, it's part of the problem today. I mean, I don't believe in censoring anything for adults. And I start to roll back as I'm going into the teen years, young adults, there's a gray area there, 14, 15, 16, where, letting them read things that are more adult, you should do it. You becoming an adult, you should be able to start Do I want someone 12 or 13 years old reading Conan? No, not my book. No. Do I want someone 14? That's up to the parents. Anyone between 14 and 18, that's up to the parents. I mean, my children, yes and no. My children are all at their own intellectual levels. I could think of at least one that I would definitely have no problem with her reading it. I have all daughters. I have no problem with her reading it at 14. I think of another one where I'd probably want her to be 17 or 18 before she read it. They each have their own intellectual progress. So that's what I mean. It's up to the parent. I can't stop the parents from putting this book in the hands of their children, but I personally can stop from me putting it in the hands of their children. That's their choice, not my choice. So I'm really looking forward to the book coming out, but I'm really worried about the cancel culture that's out here right now. There's going to be some groups, I'm not going to get into specifics, but there's going to be some groups where they're going to get to certain parts of the story and they're just going to put it to the side. They're going to be like, oh, disgusted, without finishing reading it and actually seeing the transformation and empowerment that takes place during that book. Because there is an empowerment for Loriana in that book. She becomes a leader through the process of that book. She becomes a queen. So I'm really looking forward to it coming out. I mean, it could be as early as next Friday. That would be the 21st of April, 2023. It could be coming out. And it might be the very beginning of May that it will come out. I don't know yet. But it's right there. It's the next couple weeks. My book will be launching. I'll let you know when it launches. I'll share a link when it launches. But I'm really looking forward to it. And the best thing about it is, anybody who's a Ron Howard fan, I studied Ron Howard before writing it. I read all the Conan stories when I was a kid. And prior to writing it, I spent about a month and a half listening to the Conan stories over and over and over to make sure that I catch the essence of a Robert E. Howard style novella. It's much more brutal than the Robert E. Howard stories, but the pace of it, the way it's written, the way it moves, the way it flows, I really wanted to pay tribute to Robert E. Howard with it. And I wrote it because my dad was the one that introduced me to Conan, and when he passed away, for some reason, the first memory I latched onto was watching Conan for the first time with him as a kid. And prior to that, I was a big King Arthur fan. I still am a King Arthur fan, but prior to that, King Arthur was the bomb. And then Conan came along, and I was like, whoa, what's this? Whoa. And the funny thing is, other than the very first Conan movie, my only influence to Conan comes from Robert E. Howard. So it's worked out really well that I never did get into the Conan comic books. I didn't get into the other Conan movies. It worked out really good. There's only a little bit in the very beginning that ties in with the movie slightly, and it's only in the very beginning. It's the village scene, but I wrote the scene the way I saw it play out. So it is different from the movie, but it's definitely inspired by the movie. The very first village scene in the book is definitely inspired by the movie. But the rest of it, other than some of the characters, a lot of characters, I introduce new characters, like I said, Sharon. I bring back some old characters, I bring back some old foes. It's going to be I think, the Robert E. Howard fan base of Conan, I think they're really going to like my book. I think they're really going to be happy with what I did, because I definitely paid respect to Robert E. Howard in my book, or I did the best I could, at least. Like I said, it's more brutal than his books, but I really tried to catch the essence of the way it's written and the way it flows and the way it carries out and even the way it ends. I really tried to pay respect to Robert E. Howard, so I hope people like it.